Get your stinking rat out. It's late night large.
Hello and welcome to a late night large that was the one taking photos of your mum that time. Cocking a snook is me, Aaron Bliss, and cocking his leg is Mike Large. How we doing, Mike?
Yeah, doing tired today, but
Oh, bless you.
yeah, do you know what? Do give me your sympathy.
Have you been growing particularly dirty this last week and a bit?
I think you know the answer to that, don't you? Right, let's not beat around the bush. Not anymore. I've done that.
No, I guess so.
You know the answer to that question.
I wish I didn't, but yeah. Yeah, I've been without my vehicle the last few days, which was the perfect thing to happen just when I was having some annual leave. So I've been housebound and mainly just kicking around on Far Cry 2. And I meant to mention this to you. You know when you're playing on particular games and you get so distracted from the. I mean, it's like life really. So you know in life you
I know
have
life.
yeah. So you have achievements that you're expected to hit, whether it's get the place in the career you want, get your house, get your spouse, whatever. You're supposed to be moving towards these big rites of passage, but then there are so many submissions and distractions that kind of crop up. Before you know it, you've wasted 20 years, and here you are. And yeah, so yeah, there you are. Um, Have you ever? I don't know if you've ever played Far Cry 2, Mike. It's set in. I think it's supposed to be set in the DR Congo.
Right, I haven't played it, no.
Right. Yeah. It's basically civil war ravaged Congo. It's a bit cliched, but basically you get 50 square kilometers of the country to move around in, and the idea is you keep getting given missions and submissions. But it's one of those games that's so much fun that you end up not completing anything because the idea is there's vehicles lying here, there, and everywhere, and you just jump in them and start racing around. But whenever you go past whenever you go past a little village, that has a bunch of shacks and stuff, it's usually inhabited by militias of the enemy, enemy militias. So as you drive past, you'll start hearing bullets and stuff, and then eventually they'll jump into a vehicle and they'll track you and they'll race after you and run you off the road. Now it sounds pretty tricky, but I just found the most satisfying thing ever. So what I do is I'll race through a village, wait for them to start opening fire, and then they'll chase me in a vehicle. I'll wait till they run me off the road. I'll jump straight out of my vehicle and toss a grenade underneath and then just run like fuck. And I'm sorry, I can't stop laughing every time it happens because there's these guys with they've got like turret guns on top of these vehicles, so they come over and they're shredding you, and they think oh, we'll take this guy out easy, and you just jump out, toss a grenade, take a run for it, and then there's just this obviously inordinately large explosion when the gas tank ignites, and you've just got like 3 or 4 corpses everywhere.
Literally everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. So that's been a lot of fun. So that's taken my mind off the other failures. Speaking of failures, Mike.
Yeah. Yes. Hi. Hello again.
We know what failures are like because we're living in a living, breathing failure at the moment. Because the UK, I mean, let's be fair, Mike. If you look at the current infection rate, we're in pretty dire straits at the moment.
It's pretty hard to argue with that.
Yeah.
Much I'd love to try.
I mean, I've got to be honest. As much as I obviously, what side of the fence I'm on in terms of who's governing, but I never thought that they would honestly make this big a hash of it. When you think about in March, there was obviously the excuse, even if they were a little bit corrupt and a little bit lazy and Boris Johnson didn't show up to those Cobra meetings and things like this, those are things that you can recover from, right? If you realise, hang on, I fucked up here. This is bad. I'm the Prime Minister. I need to start taking it seriously and coming up with solutions. The point about the lockdown was not we needed to do it to make ourselves feel good or to eliminate the virus entirely. The whole point in the lockdown was to give breathing space to the NHS and the government, so the government could get on with sorting a working test and trace, which of course,
I know where this is going.
yeah, I mean, you remember that. And you remember that when that came into being, that working test and trace, which, you know, Johnson kept saying over and over again that it wouldn't just be functional, it would be world beating. Once that was here, even the experts said, you can effectively go back to nearly normal. If you have a functioning test and trace, yes, we can't allow people in, you know, big sports stadiums or conventions or whatever. But, you know, we can have people in the pub, we can have people in restaurants, we can have minor outings and parties. That's fine, providing we have this functional test and trace. And then, of course, there was Christmas. You know, we all want Christmas to function the way it normally does. Test and trace was the key. We had, what was it? So March, we locked up in by April. So we've had
23rd
6 months to get this test and trace system sorted. And here we are, mid-October, and the figures, I believe, mostly are worse than mid-March.
They are, yeah.
I don't know, what can you say, Mike? I mean, before we go into anything else, what can you say about that, really?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty fucking good question, isn't it? Because what can you say that, well, I mean, what can you say that we haven't said already?
Well, true.
Do you know what I mean? It's,
sometimes I just think we need to kind of try and remove any element of partisanship from the debate and just say the people that are governing the country had 6 months to get us back to normal. Whatever you think about how they did it, you know, if they were handing out contracts to their mates or whatever, or punishing, you know, certain sections of people that you thought didn't deserve to be punished, all of that would have been forgiven if we'd have got here and we had a functioning test and trace and we can effectively go back to nearly normal, right? So it's just worth reminding all of us that we are in this position again because the people we trusted to get us out of this position have got us back into the same position again. And then, you know, they go on TV and we've heard it. They've even had the gall to basically blame us.
yeah, I mean, it's like we've said it 1,000 times. If you start putting the impetus on the common man to, you can't do it. Like, oh, you know, people just have to use their own common sense, and so you start saying shit like that, just straight away, you know that it's just everything. Then is just bullshit. It's just bullshit because like Joe fucking Blogs doesn't have common sense. Barely has 2 fucking brain cells to rub together, right? And you want to put the safety of the country, the security of the economy, etc., on their shoulders? No. Right, fucking average Joe down the road is thick as pig shit. Right, you fucking tell them what to do. You make the decisions. That's what you're paid for. If they don't do it, cool. Tell them, bunch of cunts, your fault. And don't get me wrong, people haven't been properly everyone, have they?
No.
So yeah, okay, to a degree. You can say, well, we did actually say this, and they didn't do that. granted, we weren't very clear on this. We didn't say this. We could have done this. We didn't do this in time. Whatever. Yeah, all that stuff's true. But we did say this, and they didn't do those. So, yeah. I mean, there's arguments both ways, isn't there?
There is.
Generally, it's hard to avoid the glaring fact that it's been a monumental fuck up.
Yeah. Like you say, it's difficult. Sometimes it's difficult to find a different way of looking, a different perspective of looking at this fucking bin fire that's been the whole COVID pandemic response. So, Mike, the last week or so, I think the big developing story that's been in the news that's kind of mixed things up a little and made things a bit more interesting is what's growing on in the north.
Oh yeah.
Which is we're talking particularly Greater Manchester, but I don't know if you saw, Mike. Apparently, I'm going to pass over to you to explain the tier system in a minute, because obviously that's what this whole fuss is about. But the tier system, when it was announced and what have you and implemented, I read that apparently it effectively means that over 50% of the country is now back in lockdown.
I don't know where you read. I don't know where you read that.
No, I can't even remember. But it effectively said that over half of the country is back in lockdown.
It is or would be.
Well, if they applied the tiers correctly, I would assume.
Okay, right, yeah, okay, because there's been a lot of debate about that. So There's been a lot of debate about, well, obviously, what each tier should mean, but also about how it gets applied and whether it's enforced or whether it should be enforced essentially, because there's a lot of talk with local government. So it involves discussions with local government, and basically they come to a compromise as to what they're happy to do. So I think the tiers, which tier they fall into, is probably forced on them. No, it's not actually. That's bullshit. It's not. But there's discussion. But even if you do even if you are the local government and you manage to get your arm twisted into moving into tier 3, you still have a say over what that means. So there's no rigid, this is it. It's as per local arrangement. Basically.
Okay. Before we go on, Mike, I'm not really clear on what the tiers mean. So
before we go on, right? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, yeah. So
for
right.
For the uninitiated, just let us know what the tiers mean.
For the uninitiated, basically, you've got 3 tiers, right? You've got tier 1, right? Tier 1. So this is what they classify as medium risk.
Right.
At the moment, that is pretty much the whole country. I mean, the vast majority of the country. Medium risk, tier 1. So that is life as we knew it before they made any most recent announcements. Yeah. So follow the rule of 6, because that's fucking great. And yeah, you got your 10 o'clock curfew on the pubs. But basically, it's business as usual, or what had been business as usual.
Yeah.
Carry on. Tier 1, medium risk. You're all right. Then you got tier 2. So tier 2 was effectively, I mean, tier 2 was basically you can't do the intermixing of people within households. So you still can meet up with people outside, but you can't meet up inside. You can't do it. So that's, and there were parts where I mean, there were some places that got put in tier 2. I mean, I can't for the life of me. I think so. London now, I don't know if they were like very first. They've recently been put into tier 2. I think parts of London, There were a few areas a bit further north, not north, but a bit further north. I think
Was
pretty
there
much
parts of the West Country? I heard parts of the West Country in Tier 2, I think.
no. There is, or there's going to be.
Right.
I think they're talking about that in the next couple of days. Like I said, a couple of days ago, London went into obviously time of recording. But so basically, it's kind of the same, but you can't mix households indoors.
Okay.
And then you've got tier, and that's high risk. So tier 2, high risk. And then you've got tier 3. Tier 3 is very high risk. You're gonna die. You're all fucked. You're dead. No.
Yeah, we're just gonna flood the chamber.
Yeah. So that is like no mixing the households at all. Not inside, not outside down the park, none of that. And you've got what we would have known before as an actual lockdown, basically. Pubs closed.
Local business. Right.
Fucked. So that's your tier 3. So your tier 3 is pretty much what lockdown was. Tier 2 is like set your fucking game up because you're heading there, and tier 1 is carry on as you were. So that's a bit of a breakdown for y'all. If you weren't aware, if you didn't catch that.
Mike. One thing. By the way, very well explained. Well done.
Yeah.
Question for you. Do you think that this tiered thing would have made a lot more sense if we'd have implemented it just after the lockdown ended? As in when we first came out of lockdown. If we'd have set that up, maybe not put anyone in it, like say everyone's in tier 1 now, but set it up straight away.
I mean, what you would have done is you'd have had a phased exit. So what you'd have done is you'd have had lockdown, which would have been tier 3 effectively as it is now. You got your lockdown. And then what you could have done, you monitor cases by area, etc. When it's safe to do so, an area of the country can then go, okay, you're now tier 2. You're now tier 2. You successfully, rates go the right way, etc., etc. Maybe you're in tier 2 for a couple of weeks. Right, you can be in tier 1 now, and you kind of that would be a phased exit. That would have made sense, but I mean, yeah. But then I don't. It's hard to say, isn't it? Because lockdown was too fucking late itself. So,
well, yeah. I mean, that was the point I was trying to make. Is effectively most of these ideas are reasonable in a way, like they make logical sense. But fuck me, do they take a long time to implement them? And by the time they have, it strikes me as like, you wait for a fire to gut most of the rooms in your house before you go, I think we better call the fire brigade. Like instead of just when you see some smoke, like, oh shit, we need to take action, right? Close all the doors, seal all the windows, call the fire brigade straight away. It's almost like, let's see how this progresses. Maybe we could chuck some water at it, see if that works. And then, every time it seems like a month, 2 months too late for everything.
Yeah, well, it's very. Yeah, I mean, that kind of it feels like there's been a kind of a very naive approach or way of looking at things, and I know it's easy to say in hindsight, and I know that we don't have to make these kind of fucking decisions with the whole country fucking leaning on us and trying to push us one way or another and pulling us around.
That's true. But, although I could say if I was paid that salary, I think I could make a slightly better job, as could you, as could pretty much everyone I know, because I think anyway, no, I was going to go down a path there of but
So
it's hard to imagine many people making a worse job of it. Again, I give them a bit of a pass for the March thing because it was unprecedented, and you could argue that the way that it's been tackled is completely synchronized with what kind of character the Prime Minister is, because Johnson has always been an optimistic, don't do details, everything will be fine, just need a bit of pluck to get through this. And that's effectively how it was handled, until the lockdown was forced, like the hand was forced. It was all very much like, I mean, I can't believe it's not thrown back at them time and time again. He literally said that we should all take it on the chin.
People will get through this.
Yeah, but what I mean, Mike, is I see ministers now. They bristle, particularly when they're online and whatever, and they just say this is an outright lie. We were never going for herd immunity. Literally, Johnson is recorded as saying maybe it's better if we all take it on the chin. How is that not herd immunity? That's literally what he said. So it's like it's infuriating as well when people are gaslighted, which has been happening a lot, because as we said before, blaming the public, because again, they effectively implied that young people were to blame, and then young people were obviously coming back with, hang on a minute, I thought we were supposed to eat out to help out. I thought we were supposed to spend money in the economy. That was supposed to assist with the issue, and then suddenly it's like, oh no, we're having too much fun, too much freedom, and it's our fault. But yeah, so anyway, the North problem, the big thing that's been kicking off the brouhaha has been mainly led by Andy Burnham, who's, I think, the mayor of, is he the mayor of Manchester or the mayor of Greater Manchester?
Greater Manchester, isn't it, I think?
Could be. Anyway, so Andy Burnham's got himself in the headlines. I've always kind of been a bit of a fan of Andy Burnham. I thought he was a decent Labour MP. But he was also my second choice behind Corbyn for leader. But he made a fair point, Mike. I don't know if you heard, but he's refusing to implement Tier 3, not because he doesn't think it's needed, but he's like, you can't just impose this and offer no financial compensation that measures how much people are going to lose out. And another thing that infuriated me, Mike, I don't know what your opinion is again on this, is what the fuck is the Chancellor saying when he comes out with, we are going to offer 2/3 of salary to people on furlough for this second period? Where has 2/3 been plucked out of? From 80%. You said 80% was sufficient before, and most people said, well, yeah, it is. That's okay. I can still just about pay my rent and get by, and I'm not going anywhere. So that 20% for most people, it was something they could tolerate, right? Now he's saying 2/3, but there's no 2/3 reductions on rent. There's no 2/3 reduction on food shopping. So how the fuck are people supposed to survive on 2/3 of their salary? Where has that come from?
I think the logic they're applying is those that typically earn lower amounts anyway, or that would need some form of support, be that like universal credit, that's a whole different, we could do a whole fucking show on that. They can get extra help, basically. So the lower, so I think that's basically my understanding is kind of, when questioned, that's pretty much what he's come back and said is, well, actually, okay, you're going to be earning less now, but any help that you were entitled to will be increased. So it should help bridge that gap further. That was the logic that he was kind of applying.
Do you know what? I'm going to be really, really generous and say that kind of makes sense in a way. And the reason it makes sense is because we've all heard about how many companies took the fucking taxpayer for a ride with the furlough scheme. And I mean, obviously it's easy to believe because our press, the state of our press, is the worst in Europe at least. But yeah, I think the Daily Mail was blaming workers for scamming the furlough scheme. So, they shouldn't have been working. It was them working. That's what the fraud was. It's like, on what planet does that make any logical sense? But anyway, I'll give Sunak the benefit of the doubt, because if he genuinely believes that will happen, it will reduce taxpayer loss due to the fraud from companies that were taking the piss. The problem with that, again, as we know, or as we've read, universal credit is not that easy to get top-ups or anything from. So, good luck.
And there's a delay on it as well.
Yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
so you have a couple of weeks, you're taking that hit a bit harder. But
yeah, and so basically,
it's a balance, though, isn't it? It's hard.
It's sad that it has to be a balance, because you would hope that companies could be trusted not to abuse the furlough scheme, but clearly that's happened. Speaking of abusing public trust, in fact, sorry, no, I was just going to clarify what did you think of the? So do you think Andy Burnham's onto something? Do you think he should hold out and basically say no tier 3 till we get the funding?
I think fair play to him in it. So there's two very different ways of looking at it. You can think, you've irresponsible fucking prick. You're like, this is people's lives. The more you delay this, the more people could die. Yeah. Like, that is like, just for fuck's sake, nothing is more important than that. Just get it done. And you would understand people, depending on their own personal circumstances, you would understand people thinking that way. And then there's the other side where you think, do you know what? Yeah, fair fucking play. Like, so the government has come up with this scheme or this new system, but it seems like they kind of not really ironed out all the details. So they're implementing something that it's not really finished. It's not really the finished product. It doesn't outline exactly what, you can't just close people's lives down and just say, yeah, no, don't worry about it though. What do you mean? Well, what do I do? How do I put, how my business is going to close? What support do I get? Yeah, I mean, we'll have a look at that. No, tell me. Like, I need to fucking know. Like, you're telling me to shut the fucking doors on my business.
Yeah.
I kind of like to know. Am I going to put food on my table when I do that?
Okay, Mike. Can I suggest an alternative?
Go on.
So, I know there's some people, bootlickers probably, but there are some people who might say, oh, it's all very well for you two to whinge, you don't have that much pressure and you don't know what it's like, and this is... So I'm going to take that on board and say, you know what, you're right. It's about time I came up with a suggestion rather than slagging off something that's obviously very difficult. So here's my suggestion.
Go on.
Doing a lockdown. No government money gets paid up front. What happens instead? No rent. Rent amnesty. Commercial rent, property rent amnesty until the lockdown is over. And before you say, hang on a minute, the landlords get to apply to the government for assistance if they require it. I would love to see some of these landlords who charge, I think, take the piss rent rates, going to the government and explaining why they deserve this kind of rent compared to the rental costs, in other areas of the economy. And it would shine a light, on some of the take the piss merchants and slumlords, quite frankly. And aside from my own personal preferences, I think we can all agree that the people who've done the least work or the least sacrifice during this time are people who do nothing but own property. So I'm not saying, I'm not saying take the landlords out and shoot them in the street in front of their families. I'm just saying rent amnesty during any lockdown. That's the go-to thing, rent amnesty, and then apply to the government. If you're going to be shortchanged, like you say, but it's that's my only income. I'm a pensioner. That's my only income. Fair enough. Apply to the government. Say this is how much I'm missing out on. Could you make up the shortfall? I mean, is that not a solution? I mean, we both know that that will never get implemented for reasons that might get me into trouble for discussing. But do you think that would be workable? And why not? If not?
In theory, yeah. So what your suggestion is do a full lockdown and then implement that rule.
Yeah, because
full lockdown everywhere. So fuck the tiers. Whole country's locked down.
No. I mean, I was applying it to the tiers. I was saying,
if your area it hits tier 3, you're in tier 3, and you are a business owner or whatever. Basically, no rent. I mean, so you work in a pub,
yeah,
and it's not just commercial stuff. You're on about private or any council rent, any rent,
yeah.
Right. So you work in a pub. The pub's got to close.
Mm-hmm.
So the owner of that business doesn't have to pay any, or maybe they don't. Maybe they pay rent on the or leasehold or whatever. But fine, cool. You can't work.
Yep.
So you don't get paid, or you do get paid.
No, you would have to apply for universal credit. I would have said.
You have to apply for universal credit
during that period. Yeah.
Right.
That would obviously have to be.
That's going to cause a problem because there's a delay. And
but that's what I mean. That needs to be rectified. You can't wait 5 weeks.
Right. So
that needs to be thought of in advance.
Cool. Okay. Fine. So okay. So you say by X date.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to give people notice before going into tier 3 then.
Yeah. I mean, as much notice as you can. I know this has got to be a pretty quick fire thing, but what I mean by notice is, let's face it,
you have to give them enough notice to sort universal credit out.
Yeah. But the thing is, universal credit has no need for a 5-week waiting period. I mean, you and me, I'm sure you know this as well. The reason that 5-week waiting period was put in is because the Conservative Party think that people just doss on welfare. They put 5-week waiting period because they wanted to put people off from applying.
Let's not say it doesn't happen, but
everything happens. It's a tiny percentage of people, and of course during this period, Mike, we're going to have a lot of people who consider themselves upstanding citizens and would never dream of being unemployed, being forcibly unemployed. So
unemployed. Yeah. But okay, so you work in a pub.
Yeah.
You can't work.
Yeah.
The owner or whatever, they haven't got to worry about necessarily the business completely going under during that time because
it's basically reserved for them.
You don't have a job now, so you have no income, but you can apply for universal credit, which will be sorted out fucking quickly because it doesn't need to take so long. And I mean, it's quite an arduous process anyway. I think I've never done it, but from what I hear, it's quite ball ache. But so cool. So, but then your mate who works in the shop around the corner from your pub gets rent, doesn't have to pay rent anymore, but gets his full whack, still gets paid.
Well, yeah, that's a benefit of being a key worker, isn't it? What's wrong with that? Key workers should get a bonus. I don't have a problem with that.
I mean, I don't know what kind of how universal credit works too well with regards to what people are entitled to, or certainly how much
Yeah,
uh,
not a lot.
they are without a job. So, I mean, what you're talking is the difference between previously when it happened was, okay, you are still working, you obviously earning what you're earning before, cool, no change. You can't work anymore. The government will fund 80% of that. Your employer, if they can make up the shortfall. If not, you're running at a 20% deficit to where you were.
Yeah.
I'm guessing there's going to be quite a difference still between 100%, 80%, and then whatever you get on universal credit. I don't know.
Yeah, of course. But remember, but you're not paying your biggest household outgoing, which is your rent. That swallows up the majority of people's wages. So universal credit, you would assume, would only be used, well, hopefully just for food, because you're hoping not many bills will roll in, because you hope it won't be for more than 2, 3, 4 weeks. But two family members who were working full time, both claiming universal credit, you would hope that would tide them over with food, bits and pieces in terms of bills, just for that time period. It's a suggestion.
I mean, it's not awful. It's not worse than some of the shit I've heard them come out with, but I don't know.
I would genuinely like to hear made out, like articulated properly, list of objections to that, and then I'd put a line through any objection that was basically saying I want my rent money. So anything that was just give me my money, it's my property, I want rent, all of those are scrubbed out, and the ones that are left, if there's genuinely, Mike, what are you doing?
I was just singing.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah,
Singing silently.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, anyway, yeah. It's just that the rent is too damn high. So okay, so you're kind of on Burnham's side. You think or rather you're mostly on Burnham's side, and you said
I think that it's not unreasonable. And bear in mind, like, he's not the one that said, he hasn't decided that I mean, he probably pushed for it considerably, like most local kind of government, I imagine. But he hasn't decided that when you want to enter tier 3, or you want an area to enter tier 3, that all this discussion happens with the local leaders, and you iron out exactly what that means for that area. He hasn't decided that that's a thing, but it is. So why wouldn't you push back a little bit? Why wouldn't you say, I mean, they could say, no, fuck it, I don't care, lockdown. But no one was giving us this before. But then, so they're working with, okay, great, commendable, work with the people and the local government who maybe understand the needs, their specific areas a little bit better. Cool. So, he hasn't decided that. So, yeah, push back a bit. Say, okay, cool. The people that live here, though, X amount of people have been affected this way. What about this? What are people getting for this? What do I have to offer the people that I'm saying, do you know what? Yeah, we are going to enter tier 3. They want us to enter tier 3. We're going to do that. Any questions? Yeah, what about my business? Don't know, mate. How can I pay my rent? Not really too sure, buddy, but tier 3, all right.
Okay,
hang on. Weren't you given an opportunity to kind of tailor what this would mean? And oh yeah, I have, and I made a couple of suggestions and stuff, but there's no real plan for how you're actually going to survive.
Just eat out of the garbage. They love being out north.
Yeah, certain areas. Think of some.
Oh, Mike.
But, but yeah, no,
You know who you're referring.
yeah, you grow. But yeah, you know what? If you're given, uh, if you're given the opportunity to push back and actually look after your constituents, do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Do it. Ask questions that they would be asking or they want to know, and get them the answers they need, so that their whole. They talk about how important it is, how important mental health is, and that's one of the reasons they don't want to do this full lockdown thing again, and they really wanted to avoid it, and that's a big part of why. Well, how about offer people what they need to fucking survive then in the areas that you're saying have to effectively be in a lockdown now? Because by not sorting that out, what do they think that's doing to their mental health?
Well, yeah, but I mean, let's also remember, Mike, that if you put people into lockdown and then you say we're not giving you any financial support, people aren't going to sit at home like starving and going, "Oh God, I hope this lockdown ends." They're just going to keep going to work and they're going to keep going out. They'll just ignore it because
Yeah,
people will not just sit there and die. They need enough support to buy like food and general stuff.
yeah.
Anyway,
So go around the local shop and nick what they want.
yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, you could have serious looting problems. You said something interesting there, Mike, that I agreed with, which was local knowledge and local implementation of things. Now, I raised this because the last thing I wanted to talk about was if you look at most of the successful test and traces around Europe and other countries, the big thing was, although it was driven by government funds and government direction, government funds and government framework, it was mostly implemented at a local level by local authorities that knew their population, local health bodies, who knew their patients, etc., and they could keep a control of the area that they were most familiar with.
Yeah.
Now, you could argue that our biggest issue with everything, not just test and trace, but particularly with test and trace, is everything is centralized all the time. It's all down to fucking Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings to decide everything. Now, if they were any good at their job or were actually trying to save lives, maybe that wouldn't be too much of a problem. But I mean, just in case anyone wasn't aware of this, I thought I'd make it clear that, because I know that the government has very surreptitiously kept talking about NHS test and trace. Now, I know a lot of people are aware that that's a lie. And just to reiterate, it is a lie. The NHS has never operated test and trace. That was outsourced to Serco. Now, I don't know if you heard this, Mike, but obviously you know that the test and trace has been a complete disaster, paying an absolute king's ransom for a system where apparently people were earning fairly good wages to track like one person a week. Right? So, by the way, all those people suffering, just get a fucking job at Serco. But the worst bit about it, and again, this is what makes you grind your teeth down to the gums in anger, is that there was a bill raised, I think, by the Labour Party to say that Serco the contract needs to end and it needs to be brought in-house for NHS and local authorities. And the Conservatives voted it down and gave the contract back to Serco again.
Of course they did. You sound surprised.
Of course they fucking did. Now, I thought I'd just quickly refer to this meme that someone made. Obviously, it's not just a silly meme. It's one that's rooted in just giving actual statistics and facts. So somebody made a meme here about. I mean, you'll know that Dido Harding, who is a Conservative member of Parliament, was effectively handed the role of being in charge of public health when Public Health England was blamed for everything and abolished. And she was given the job, despite the fact that her previous biggest position, I think, had been was it Talk Talk? The biggest thing that happened while she was in charge there was they had a massive fraud case against them. So basically, she's had nothing but failures on her record, and now she's in charge of public health. Now, the meme says, which is relatively accurate, if Dido Harding was made to give back the £12 billion for the track and trace that doesn't work, the government could give every pub in the land 100 grand, pay off the overspend of all local authorities, and buy the working German version trace system with 4 billion left over. Now, while that sinks in, Mike, let's remember that not only is Dido Harding a Conservative member of Parliament, which I know people who might not know much about this. The head of the public health is not supposed to be a political position. You're supposed to give that to an expert in public health, not to one of your cronies who agrees with you. So the fact that Dido Harding was given that position in the first place is really out of order. And then you remember that her husband is also a Conservative member of Parliament and was made anti-corruption champion by Boris Johnson. So, I mean, unless they're trying to take the piss here, you basically have handed the head of public health to a Tory MP who's the husband of a Tory MP who was set up as the anti-corruption champion. So, I mean, that's just
that is you couldn't write it, could you?
No, it's comical levels of corruption and cronyism. But
yeah,
speaking of,
not new, is it?
No, it's been. I think it's been worse in the last 2 years, I think, than I've ever known it. I mean, John Major's government was bad, and parts of Blair's government was pretty bad. But I've never known it to be so in your face and like laughable, like you say, like the one I just mentioned. But I don't know. Do you know much about Serco, Mike? The company?
Not as much as you.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. I know most of mine from stuff I read online. So because it's been a while since we've gone to Wikipedia, I thought I'd look up Serco on Wikipedia, because Serco are one of those funny companies that exist mostly doing government work. So, I mean, in my personal opinion, they're the kind of company that shouldn't really exist, because government work should be done by government people. It should be people employed by the government to do these things. Now, there's an argument to be made that, you know, some things you don't do all the time, so you need to outsource them, and that's perfectly understandable. You know, you don't always need to do certain projects, and it makes sense to hire those out to contractors who are good at doing those things. What it doesn't make sense to do is to permanently basically outsource crucial functions of the government to a company, particularly because there was a report, I think an internal report a few years ago, that stated that the problem with outsourcing to these companies is that there are only 4 or 5 companies that are big enough in the entire country to fulfill these contracts. So you do the math with that. So say you employ one company to do something and they fail badly, what other choice have you got? There's only a couple of other companies that could even do it. So this is the problem. That one thing is that these companies are few and far between. But just to give you some of the highlights on their Wikipedia page, so going right up to date, July 2019, they had a fine of nearly £20 million imposed on them for fraud and false accounting over its electronic tagging service for the Ministry of Justice. The company was also ordered to pay serious fraud officers investigative costs of £3.7 million. The company has also been accused. Sorry, Mike.
So when was the date?
Sorry.
When was that date?
July 2019. That was applied. Yeah, just last year.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Carry on.
I should just mention, by the way, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the thing that they were fined for was they used to tag prisoners, you know, that were on release, so you keep track of them, and it got found that they were billing the government for tagging dead people.
What? That was proven.
Yeah. The company has also been accused of an extensive cover-up over sexual abuse of immigrants at Yarl's Wood Immigration Removal Centre in Bedfordshire. I should mention the word accused, so that hasn't been categorically proven, but that was in the news a lot. And together with Serco's consortium partners failed to develop a strategy for managing higher active radioactive waste at the atomic weapons establishment. So that's some of their worst cock-ups. But if you go down this list, because they do a hell of a lot of government work, there are horrific things that they've done that they've been punished for, and they still keep getting contracts. Like, so in Scotland, right? In Scotland, in Glasgow in 2018, it's only 2 years ago, it's disclosed that Serco had been planning to evict asylum seekers before their appeal procedure was completed. Lawyers questioned whether that was legal under Scottish law, and 2 of the asylum seekers started hunger striking. Serco confirmed it was serving a notice of eviction on many tenants, causing alarm, and lawyers challenged 1 asylum seeker's eviction at the Scottish Court of Session. Long story short, Serco ended up losing the contract to provide housing to asylum seekers. A freedom of information request by the Scottish Refugee Council showed that Serco had been charged nearly £3 million for the Home Office for repeatedly breaching its contract to housing asylum seekers in Glasgow and Northern Ireland. And the only other thing I should mention is that they massively bungled healthcare contracts as well, because, as you know, a lot of the NHS is being privatised, effectively contracted out to private companies. Now, they were one of the private companies, and they made a massive balls up. They've actually pulled out, and they've effectively said they're not doing it anymore, which, fair play, at least they admit it. But their biggest bungle, I believe, was GP drop-in centre was contracted to them to operate. And apparently they had to have their contract ended because they led to a shortfall in GPs in the county. Anyway, I feel like that was something that needed to be talked about, because Serco effectively are the reason that we're in this mess. Yes, the government makes the decisions and they shouldn't be let off the hook. But who is responsible for the test and trace system? Serco. And
well, yes, but then I mean, you could go. I'd argue you could go one step further.
Yeah.
And say, why Serco?
Well, there you go. Like I say, there's 2 particular things that spring to mind as to why Serco. Number one, as I said, there's only 2 or 3 other companies big enough to handle the contract, so you've not got much choice unless you do the obvious thing, bring it in-house and have the fucking NHS do it like they should have been. Yeah. And number 2, which you won't be surprised to hear, is Serco donates to the Conservative Party.
Well, yeah.
I mean, that goes without saying, doesn't
it? Their CEO is a relative of Winston Churchill, isn't he?
Fair play, Mike. I'd actually forgotten about that. I saw that on Wikipedia and was like, fucking hell. He is not only is he a relative, he's a grandson of Winston Churchill, and he's the brother of a Tory MP, or a former Tory MP, you know, one of the ones that got sacked by Johnson.
Yeah.
So they're all in it together. You know, you don't have to pitch very far to find someone who's related to, or best friends, or donated to a member of the Conservative Party.
Yeah, you won't have to. You wouldn't be hard pushed to guess where he's educated either, I don't think.
No, I don't think you would, no. So I'll tell you what, I made a comment the other day, because I've always been very opposed to Serco after seeing their list of cock-ups, and I can't believe they're still getting government contracts. And the problem with this test and trace thing, the most outrageous thing about it is the contract was renewed with no penalties. So they're effectively responsible for bringing the country to a standstill. No penalties. Just fork over more money. So, I mean, there you go. This is the state of things at the minute. How do you see things going over the next week or 2, Mike? Do you see any big stories developing, or things getting worse or better?
I see it growing. I think it depends on. I think old Andy Burnham could be doing us a favour, because I think he's going to force the government really to actually come up with something a little bit more.
Stop paying silly buggers.
for regards with with regards to what they actually do in when you entered into tier 3 and stuff. So it'd be interesting to see how the tier thing works out. We've not had that for long, have we? So another few weeks of that, I imagine, we'll either be going, actually, kind of had an all right effect, I suppose, like as begrudgingly as we probably would want to say, or we'd be going, well, we fucking said, and look at the shit that's caused. And I think that's probably more likely. But I think that'll be quite an interesting one. See how that develops. See if there is actually they do kind of rehash and come up with some kind of actual plan for tier 3 areas, or certainly a more stringent one that actually like encompasses everything they need it to protect the area, the people of the area, obviously the businesses of the area as well. So be interesting. That'll be interesting to see if they fix that. I mean, other than that, I mean, you don't really want to focus too much on the way of the way the fucking rates are going and the cases and stuff like that, because well, I mean, it kind of seems a bit doom and gloom at the moment, doesn't it?
It does. But, there's one thing for sure, Mike, is that we'll keep appearing and giving our own opinions of it, and hopefully having kind of a little bit of a laugh at how ridiculous the whole situation is. And just to say to everyone, just keep your heads, because this will pass eventually. We've got the worst possible people in charge, but if we look out for each other, and the Late Night Large motto, don't be an arsehole. Wear a mask if you're in a shop. Yeah, wash your hands. Keep your distance from people that you don't know, etc. Just don't be stupid, and hopefully we can get through this kind of intact. I don't know. But yeah, we've been talking for a while, so that's it for Late Night Large this week. Anything to end with, Mike?
No, all I'd say is, best if you haven't subscribed and you're listening to this, why not? Ask yourself a question. Or I will. So yeah, subscribe to that shit. You love it. Tell your mates, your sister, your brother, your mother, your aunties, second cousins.
Yeah,
your
creepy uncle that always gives you that really unflattering nickname and touches you in unpleasant places when he's had too much to drink.
Yeah, and when you pretend not to like it, and
made Mike the man he is.
Yeah. So yeah, but no, subscribe. Tell everyone, subscribe, hit like, chuck us some comments. You disagree with something that I've said, keep it to yourself because you're full of shit. Disagree with something that Aaron said, by all means.
Yeah. You know what? Tell me what you think of my rent amnesty plan, because I think
tell him he's an idiot. Tell him he's stupid. Right? Let us know, and and I will deliver that message. Disagree with me, I wouldn't bother because you're stupid. But yeah, do that. Let us know. Bit of interaction. Something you want us to talk about. You think we've missed out? Like, actually, you've covered this, and this, and you forgot to mention this. Dickheads. Talk about that next week. Cool. We will. Chill out. But let us know. Goes both ways.
Please, please give us some interaction. We don't just want to talk to each other. So
I mean, but how I said it, he just sounded desperate. I don't. Please.
And on that note, Mike can fuck off, and we will see you next time, people.